I'd become an accountant of absence. Every morning started the same way. Coffee first, black now, though Thomas used to tease me about how much cream I needed. Said my coffee looked like milk with ideas. I'd forgotten what sugar tasted like. Forgotten sweetness was possible. After coffee came the calendar. Not the one hanging in the kitchen with its pretty drawings of wild roses, the real one. The leather-bound book where I'd marked every single day since Thomas died. 1,247 days. I knew that number better than I knew my own age, better than I knew the balance in my account at the bank, though I could afford to check that too. I could afford good paper, good ink, could afford anything except the one thing that mattered. So I bought expensive ledgers instead and filled them with tallies of loss. My hand was steady when I made the marks. That was the problem. 3 years of practice had turned grief into muscle memory. Clean strokes, precise numbers. No shaking, no tears. Just the scratch of pen on paper, and another day counted. The house was quiet around me. Too quiet for a house this size. Thomas had built additions, planning for the family we'd have. Extra bedrooms that stayed empty. A dining room table that sat 8. I used 1 chair. 1 plate in the sink each night. 1 cup. Always 1. I looked around the room sometimes and saw everything he'd touched. The chair he'd refinished when we were first married. The window he'd installed himself because I wanted morning light in the kitchen. The bookshelf he'd built too tall and we'd laughed about, saying we'd grow into it. I hadn't grown. Just older. And alone. People said time heals. They were wrong. Time just gives you more days to count, more distance to measure between yourself and the last moment you were whole. I measured mine in ink. Outside my window, I could see the land. Modest holdings, pastures, some cattle in the distance, all managed by someone else now. I'd hired a rancher 6 months back to handle what Thomas used to do. Couldn't bring myself to go out there anymore. Couldn't stand watching cattle graze on grass Thomas had planted. Couldn't bear seeing fence posts he'd set with his own hands. So I stayed inside, counted days, existed. When did grief become my occupation? When did I trade living for accounting? I didn't know. Couldn't pinpoint the day it shifted from mourning to monument. But somewhere in those 1,247 days, I'd stopped trying to heal and started trying to memorialize, as if the counting itself was a kind of loyalty, as if stopping would be betrayal. My hands were still smooth, no calluses anymore, no dirt under my nails. I used to help Thomas with everything, mending fence, checking cattle, planting kitchen gardens. Now I paid someone else to do it all. Paid with money Thomas had left me. Comfortable money. Secure money. Money that couldn't buy back a single day. I remembered Thomas's voice sometimes. "We'll grow old here," he'd said. Standing on the porch, looking out at the land, his arm around my waist. But only I got old. He stayed young. Stayed 32 forever, frozen in the grave while I counted days and grew gray. I had means, had security, had everything except what mattered. What right did I have to wallow when I could afford not to? The guilt was another kind of weight. Women in town were starving, children orphaned, real hardship, real poverty. And here I sat in my comfortable house with my expensive ink, counting losses like they were the only currency that mattered. But grief doesn't negotiate with bank accounts. Thomas was just as dead whether I had money or not. Loss doesn't care about comfort. I made my mark in the calendar, day 1,248. Clean, precise, permanent. Tomorrow would be 1,249. I already knew what that day would look like, exactly like this one. And the day after, and the day after that. The calendar was my companion now. Had been for longer than Thomas was my husband. We'd been married 892 days before he died. I'd been counting loss for 1,247. I'd counted loss longer than I'd counted love. What did that say about me? I closed the calendar and looked out the window at morning light, the kind of light Thomas loved, golden and new and full of possibility. I saw only another day to mark, another number to add, another tally in the endless absence. Day 1248. Done. Tomorrow I'd do it again. The rancher I'd hired came on a Tuesday. I hadn't expected him. Our arrangement was monthly visits, reports delivered, papers signed, money exchanged. Professional. Distant. Safe. The way I preferred things. But there he was, knocking on my door with his hat in his hands. I'd been in the middle of my morning ritual when he knocked, the calendar open on my desk. The number visible, 1248. Like a confession I hadn't meant to share. I should have closed it. Should have hidden my private grief before answering. But why would I? This was my house, my business, my laws. He came in when I opened the door. Respectful nod, quiet voice. Morning, Mrs. Hartley. Brought the quarterly reports. I noticed his hands first. Work-worn, capable. Everything mine weren't anymore. Calluses from fence wire and reins and all the things I used to know how to do before I traded living for counting. He set the papers on my desk, saw the calendar immediately. Couldn't miss it. Open, exposed, the number stark as a scar. I waited for him to look away, to pretend he hadn't seen. That's what people did with grief, averted their eyes like it was indecent. But he didn't look away. That's considerable days to count as loss, ma'am. Not judgment, just statement. Matter of fact, like he was commenting on cattle numbers or fence repairs. But it landed different. Landed like truth I hadn't wanted said aloud. Something hot flashed through me. Anger. Shame. Both. I can afford good paper, I said. Cold, clipped. Good ink. Why shouldn't I use it? The words were designed to shut him down, to put distance between us, to remind him this was employer and employee, nothing more. He was here to manage my land, not comment on my grief. He nodded, didn't argue, just picked up the pen I'd left on the desk and signed where he needed to sign. I watched his hand move. Steady, sure, the way mine used to be before it learned to shake with things I couldn't say. He finished signing, set the pen down carefully, looked at me with eyes that had their own kind of knowing. Just seems a heavy burden to carry alone, ma'am, he said. All that counting. Then he was gone, hat back on his head, boot steps fading down my porch. I stood at the closed door, breathing too fast. Who was he to comment? To walk into my house and see my private ritual and speak about it like he had any, right? What did he know about loss? About the weight of days piling up like debts you couldn't pay? Alone, he'd said. Was I alone? The word rattled around in my head. I had means, had security, had this house and the land and money in the bank, had everything I needed. Except someone to talk to. Except someone who understood. Except Thomas. I looked at the calendar still open on my desk. 1,248 days marked. Considerable days, he'd called them. Like I didn't know. Like I hadn't counted every single one. Like I hadn't made each mark deliberately, consciously, choosing to remember instead of choosing to forget. But what was I remembering? The love? Or just the loss? I thought of Thomas, the way he used to look at me when I kept things inside. Talk to me, he'd say, gentle, patient. Don't carry it alone. But Thomas was gone. Who was left to talk to? I made the mark for day 1,248 in angry strokes. Heavy ink, dark lines. Like I could make the number mean more by pressing harder. Heavy burden. What did a ranch hand know about burdens? But the word stayed with me. All that counting. As if counting itself was the burden, not what I was counting. As if the ritual had become the weight instead of the grief. I closed the calendar and put it away. Tomorrow I'd open it again. Mark day 1,249. continue the accounting. But tonight, for the first time in 1,248 days, I wondered if he might be right. Maybe I was carrying something I didn't have to carry. Maybe counting wasn't the same as honoring. Maybe alone was heavier than I'd admitted. He came back a week later. I didn't expect it, wasn't prepared. He'd done his monthly visit, signed his papers. Should have been another 3 weeks before I saw him again. But there he was, on my porch. No papers in his hands this time, just a blank ledger. Leather-bound like mine. Simple, unmarked. "Mrs. Hartley," he said. "Wondered if you'd try something for me?" I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "Try what?" He held up the ledger. "Want to count different?" The words didn't make sense at first. Count different. Count what? Count how? "Every day," he said, "write one blessing, just one. See what happens." I felt my jaw tighten, my hands clench. Who was he to offer me solutions? To walk up to my house with his blank book and his simple answer to complicated grief? "I have means," I said. The words came out sharp. "Comfort, security. What right do I have to complain?" He didn't flinch, just stood there, patient as stone. "I didn't say you were complaining, ma'am, just offering another way to count." "My grief is selfish enough," I continued, the words spilling out now. "Without pretending I need gratitude lessons from—" I stopped. But we both knew what I'd almost said. From a ranch hand. From someone who worked for me. From someone who had no business commenting on my life. The silence stretched. "Fair enough," he said finally. But he didn't leave. Just set the ledger on the small table beside my door. "Not asking you to stop marking days. Just asking you to count something else alongside them. If it doesn't help by day 30, burn it." 30 days. A deadline. An escape clause. I should have refused. Should have handed the ledger back and told him to mind his own business. Should have reminded him he was here to manage cattle, not my grief. But something in his quiet persistence, not pushiness, just steady presence, made me hesitate. "Why do you care?" I asked. He looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw something in his eyes I recognized. Loss. Old loss. The kind that's worn smooth instead of sharp. "Because I counted days once too," he said. "Took me a long time to stop. Longer to start counting different. Would have helped if someone had shown me sooner." The confession hung between us. 30 days, I said. Heard myself agreeing before I'd decided to agree. "Then you leave this alone." 30 days, he nodded, tipped his hat, started to leave. "Wait," I said. Didn't know why. Didn't know what else to say. He turned back. "What happened?" I asked. "When you stopped counting?" He thought about it. "Found out grief don't disappear when you stop marking it, but it gets quieter, makes room for other things." Then he was gone. I picked up the ledger, held it like it might burn me. Blank pages. Unmarked potential. The opposite of my calendar, with its careful record of every loss. Inside, I sat at my desk. But the new ledger beside the old calendar. 2 books now. 2 ways of counting. I resented it already. Resented him for offering. Resented myself for accepting. Resented the whole idea that gratitude could somehow balance grief. But I'd agreed. 30 days. I could do anything for 30 days. I opened the ledger to the first page, picked up my pen. Day 1. What blessing could I possibly write? What was there to notice besides absence? I looked around. The house, warm, solid. Thomas built this. That was grief, not blessing. The coffee cup beside me, still warm. That was something. I wrote, "Good coffee." 2 words. They felt hollow. Felt like betraying Thomas to notice anything good. Felt like admitting comfort when I should be drowning in loss. But I'd written them. Day 1. Done. I closed both books. Calendar of losses on the left, ledger of blessings on the right. Side by side like opposing testimonies. Like 2 different stories about the same life. Tomorrow, I'd mark day 1249 in the calendar, and I'd write another blessing in the ledger, as if they could exist together, as if counting one didn't cancel out the other. The rancher thought it would help. I thought it was foolish. But I'd find out. 30 days. Then I could burn it and go back to counting what mattered. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning, the same ritual. Coffee first, then both books. Calendar of losses on the left, 1,249, 1,250, 1,251. Each number a stone in the monument I'd built to absence. Ledger of blessings on the right, warm house, enough food, no rain today, birds returning. The entries were minimalist, grudging, but consistent. I didn't want to admit they were getting easier to write. The rancher came weekly now. Not monthly like our original arrangement. Just showed up with reports, updates, things that needed signing. Professional visits, all business. But he'd glance at the ledger if it was open on my desk. Never commented. Never asked. Just a small nod when he noticed I was still writing. No pressure, just witness. I noticed things I didn't want to notice. Firewood appeared by my door. I hadn't ordered it. Didn't need it. Had money to buy my own. But there it was, neatly stacked, the morning after a cold night. "How did you do that?" I asked, when he came with the week's report. "Seemed it needed doing," he said. The loose shutter on the east window got fixed. I hadn't mentioned it, barely noticed it myself, the way it rattled in wind. But one morning, it was quiet. "The shutter was loose," he said. "Fixed it." "I didn't ask you to." "No, ma'am, you didn't." Small things, unrequested kindnesses. They accumulated like the entries in my ledger, like blessings I hadn't asked for, but received anyway. We started talking. Short exchanges at first. Safe topics. "Cattle are looking good," he'd say. "That's fine," I'd answer. "Spring's coming early." "Seems so." But the conversations lingered, stretched. I'd make coffee while he reviewed papers. 2 cups now. Told myself it was just hospitality. Knew it was more. He told me about the land. Things Thomas used to tell me. Which pastures were best for grazing, when to move the cattle. How to read weather in the sky. I found myself listening, found myself caring. When had that happened? When had I started paying attention again? Day 40 arrived like a quiet accusation. I sat at my desk with the ledger open, pen in hand. The blessing for the day forming in my mind before I could stop it. Someone remembered to check on me. I wrote it, then stared at it, then crossed it out. Hard strokes, angry ink. Wrote instead, "Spring arriving." Safer. Less revealing. Less true. But I knew what I'd almost admitted. Knew who I'd been thinking about when I wrote it. I closed the ledger quickly. Like closing it could erase the thought. But the thought remained. I'd started listening for his footsteps. Started recognizing the pattern of his boots on my porch. Started knowing when Tuesday would come because that's when he visited. When had his silence become familiar? When had I begun to miss it when he was gone? I thought about Thomas. About how Papa used to say Thomas was a good man because he noticed what needed doing without being asked. Firewood before you knew you'd need it. Fence mended before it broke. Love shown in action instead of words. This rancher had the same quality. I hated noticing, hated comparing, but I couldn't stop. The 2 ledgers sat on my desk. I picked them up, one in each hand. Same size, same leather, different weight. The calendar was heavier, had been heavier for weeks now. The ledger, lighter, easier to hold. Same number of pages, different burden. What did that mean? I set them down, side by side again. Day 40 in the ledger. Day 1,287 in the calendar. I'd been writing blessings for 40 days, still marking losses for over 1,200. But something had shifted. Some balance had changed. The monument to absence felt different now. Less like loyalty, more like habit. And the ledger felt less like betrayal, more like breathing. I looked out the window at spring. Real spring now, not just arriving. Green pushing through brown. Life insisting itself, despite everything. Day 40. I'd told him 30 days. We were past the deadline. But I hadn't burned the ledger. Hadn't even thought about burning it. That should have scared me. That should have felt like losing Thomas all over again. Instead, it felt like something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Something that might have been hope. Day 67. I sat at my desk, crying over the ledger. Not dramatic tears. Not the kind that come with wailing or breaking. Just quiet ones. The kind that surprise you. The kind you didn't know were coming until they're already falling. The entry for that day. Thomas's favorite season. Spring in full bloom now. Everything green and new and alive. The season he loved most. Used to say spring was proof of second chances. Proof that dead things could come back. But he didn't come back. Spring came without him. The blessing and the loss tangled together. I didn't know how to hold both. A knock at the door. I wiped my eyes quickly. Tried to compose myself. Too late. He saw. The rancher stood in my doorway and saw me crying and didn't run. Didn't fix. Didn't tell me it would be okay. Just came in. Sat across from me. Respectful distance. Patient silence. I don't know how to do both, I said. The words came without permission. Poured out of me like something that had been building for 67 days. I don't know how to count blessings without forgetting what I lost. I don't know how to notice spring without remembering Thomas loved it. I don't know how to keep living without it feeling like I'm leaving him behind. He didn't speak right away, just sat there, present, listening. Then, maybe counting blessings isn't about forgetting. His voice was quiet, careful. Maybe it's about remembering you're still here, that you get to keep living. That's not betrayal. That's honoring what he'd want. Something broke in me at those words. Some last wall I'd been holding. He was a good man, I said. Started talking about Thomas. Really talking. For the first time since he died. Quiet, kind. The kind who fixed things before they broke. Who noticed what needed doing. Like firewood before winter? He asked gently. I almost smiled. Almost. Yes, like that. How did he die? Simple question. No one had asked me directly before. Quick, I said. One day he was fine. Next day he couldn't breathe. 3 days later, he was gone. I could afford doctors, treatments, everything. Didn't matter. Money can't negotiate with death. He nodded. No, it can't. The silence between us felt different now. Shared instead of separate. You asked why I care, he said finally. About the counting. About you. I waited. Lost my wife years ago. Different circumstances. Same grief. Counted days for a long time. Too long. Until someone told me she'd want me to keep living. Took me a while to believe it. Longer to do it. I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the loss in his eyes. Old loss. Worn smooth instead of sharp. How did you stop? I asked. Counting days? Didn't stop. Just started counting different days. Counted days I laughed again. Days I forgot to hurt. Days I noticed I wanted to stay alive. How long did that take? Still taking. Some days I count better than others. The honesty of it steadied me somehow. He wasn't offering me a cure, just companionship in the grief. Does it ever stop hurting? I whispered. No, he said. But it starts hurting different. Less like dying. More like remembering you're alive. I thought about that. Hurting different. Not better, just different. Outside, spring continued. Birds singing, wind moving through new leaves. Life happening whether we counted it or not. Thomas planted trees once, I said. Told me we were planting for the future. For shade we'd sit under when we were old. For children who might climb them. The trees still there? Yes, growing. He was right then. about the future. But he's not in it. No, but you are, and the trees are, and the future he planted for. I looked at the ledger, at the entry that had started my tears. Thomas's favorite season. That's a blessing too, he said quietly. That you got to love someone who loved spring. That you know what his favorite season was. That you're here to remember it. Something shifted. Some way of seeing I hadn't found before. I picked up my pen, added to the entry. And I'm still here to see it. That night, I wrote another line. Someone who understands. Day 67. And I didn't cross it out. Didn't hedge, didn't hide. Just let it be true. The calendar sat closed on my desk. I'd forgotten to mark it. First time in 1,314 days. I should have felt guilty. Felt instead like breathing. Like maybe I could hold both. Remembering Thomas and noticing I was still alive. Both could be true. Both were true. Day 89. The storm came fast. Spring storms always did. Deceptive in their speed. One moment, clear sky. Next moment, darkness rolling in like God's own anger. He rode to the house to warn me. The rancher came to tell me about the livestock, make sure I knew to secure anything loose. I watched him from the window, checking fences, moving quickly. Professional, even in crisis. Capable in ways I'd forgotten people could be. Then the storm hit. Faster than predicted. Harder than expected. The roads washed out before he could leave, creeks flooding, bridges impassable. He was stranded. Here. At my house. First person overnight since Thomas died. I can shelter in the barn, he said. Standing in my doorway, soaked from the rain, not assuming anything. Don't be foolish, I said. Heard myself say it. You'll freeze. Come in. But my heart pounded. First man in this house after dark in 3 years. First person at my table. First time I'd had to think about another human being in my space. We secured the house together. Windows latched, doors checked, loose items brought inside, moving around each other carefully. Him asking before touching anything. Me noticing how he noticed. How he waited for permission, even in small things. The storm raged outside, wind screaming, rain battering. Inside, quiet. Too quiet. Too intimate. I made dinner. My hands shook setting the table. 2 plates. I froze when I saw them. 2 plates on the table. I'd set them out without thinking. Muscle memory from marriage. From a time when 2 was normal. He saw me staring. I can eat in the other room if... No, I said. Too fast, too sharp, then softer. Stay. The word cost me everything. We sat across from each other, ate in silence at first, then small talk. Save topics. The weather, the cattle, the land. But the conversation deepened as the storm continued. Hours passing, no way to leave, no escape from the intimacy of being trapped together. He told me about his life before loss. His wife, their plans, what he thought his future would hold, what he got instead. I told him about Thomas, about our dreams, about the children we wanted, about the future we'd planned in this house that was supposed to hold family. You're afraid, he said. Not a question. Yes. Of what? I looked at the 2 plates, at the man across from me who wasn't Thomas, would never be Thomas. That if I stop counting losses, I'll forget him entirely. That if I let someone else in, I'll lose him twice. That grief is all I have left. And if I let it go, there's nothing. You've got 1,336 days memorized, he said quietly. Numbers you know better than scripture. Trust me, you won't forget. But maybe you could remember the man instead of just the missing. The man instead of the missing. I thought about that, about what I'd been counting, days since death, distance from loss, absence measured in ink. But not Thomas. Not his laugh, not his hands, not the way he loved me. I'd been counting what I lost, not what I had. "This isn't Thomas," I said. Whispered it, needed to say it aloud. "No, ma'am, it's not. It never will be. No. But maybe—" I stopped, couldn't finish. "Maybe there's room for both?" he offered. "Memory and presence, past and future?" I looked at him. This man who'd given me a ledger, who'd stacked firewood, who'd fixed shutters, who'd sat with me through grief without trying to fix it, who was sitting with me now through a storm. "Maybe," I said. The storm passed sometime in the night. Morning came, clear. Damage minimal. Roads still flooded but passable. He prepared to leave. Checked everything one more time. Made sure I'd be safe. At the door, he paused. "Thank you," he said. "For what? You're the one who—" "For letting me stay. For talking. For—" He looked at me. "For trying." After he left, I sat at my desk, opened the ledger. Day 90. Not alone in the storm. 6 words. A lifetime of meaning. The calendar still sat closed. 2 days unmarked now. I should have felt guilty. Felt instead like, maybe, possibly, I could imagine tomorrow being different from yesterday. That was terrifying. That was hope. Day 98. I stood in my kitchen holding the ledger over the stove. The fire burned steady, patient, ready to consume whatever I fed it. I could end this, go back to just the calendar, just the counting of losses, safe, known, comfortable in its misery. 30 days, I'd told him. It had been 98. Triple that deadline, more than 3 times longer than I'd agreed to try. And it was working. That was the problem. The ledger was working. I'd stopped opening the calendar some mornings, started looking forward to his visits, caught myself smiling when I heard his boots on the porch. Smiling. How dare I? Thomas was dead, and I was smiling. My hand shook, holding the book over flames. If I stop mourning, who am I? Grief had become my job, my identity, my purpose. Take away the counting and what was left? If I let someone in, I risk losing again. Can't survive it twice. Can't. Won't. The comfort of known suffering versus the terrifying possibility of hope. Better to count what I lost than risk losing again. I pulled the ledger back from the fire. My hands trembling now. Set it on the table. Opened it. Picked up my pen. Day 98. This doesn't fix anything. I wrote it angry, hard strokes. Blessings don't bring back the dead. Gratitude doesn't fill an empty bed. What's the point? But then I turned to the page. Day 99. Stared at the blank space. Wrote softer. A choice to try. Weaker, honest. The ledger wasn't replacing Thomas. I could see that now. It was replacing the monument I'd built to absence. The daily ritual of making grief permanent. Was that betrayal? Or was living in a monument the real betrayal? If Thomas were here, what would he say? Would he want this for me? This half-life, this counting of losses, this refusing to live because he couldn't? Or would he tell me what he always told me? Live, love, really live. I thought about his trees, still growing, still reaching for sky. He'd planted them for a future he'd never see. Did that make them pointless? Or did it make them proof that love continues even after the lover is gone? A knock at the door. I knew it was him. Knew without looking. Day 99. 1 day from the 100. 1 day from something significant I couldn't name. I opened the door. Tomorrow's 100, he said. I know. What are you going to do? I don't know. We stood there, him on the porch, me in the doorway, the space between us charged with everything unsaid. I almost burned it, I told him. The ledger, just now, almost ended this. Why didn't you? Because I'm afraid of forgetting, of remembering, of staying stuck, of moving forward, of choosing you and losing you, of not choosing you and living alone forever. Of everything. All of it. Every single possibility terrifies me. He stepped closer, not touching, respectful even now. "Fear's honest," he said, "but you've been brave for 99 days already. What's one more?" What if I can't? My voice broke. What if I choose wrong? What if I let him go and there's nothing to hold on to? You're not letting him go. You're letting the monument go. There's a difference. How do you know? Because I had to learn it. Because someone told me the same thing years ago. Because it's true, even when it feels like lying. I looked at him, this man who understood, who'd counted his own days, who'd found his way through to the other side. "I'm not Thomas," he said quietly. "I know. I'll never be Thomas. I know that too. But I'm here, and I care. And if you choose to really try this, I'm choosing back. I'm choosing to stay. Choosing to build something with you, if you'll let me." The weight of it settled over me, the possibility, the risk, the terrifying hope. "Tomorrow," I said. "Day 100. Ask me tomorrow." He nodded, tipped his hat. "I'll be here," he said. After he left, I sat at my desk, the ledger open, the calendar still closed. Day 99. One more day. One more choice. That night I couldn't sleep. Lay in the bed Thomas and I had shared, stared at ceiling he'd painted, thought about tomorrow. Day 100. A new kind of counting. Or a return to the old. I didn't know which direction I'd choose, but I knew, finally, terrifyingly knew, I had a choice. That was something. That was everything. Day 100. I woke before dawn. Couldn't sleep anyway. Made coffee in the dark. Waited for light. When morning came, I stood at my desk with both books open. Calendar of losses on the left. 1,347 days marked in careful ink. Ledger of blessings on the right. 99 days counted. The pen in my hand felt heavy. Heavier than it had in years. This was the choice. Mark day 1,348 in the calendar. Continue the monument. Continue counting loss. Or choose different. I thought about Thomas, about the 892 days we were married. Good days, hard days, days of laughter and days of silence, and days of just being together. I'd counted loss longer than I'd counted love. 1,347 days of grief versus 892 days of marriage. What did that say? What did I want it to say? The calendar had been my companion longer than Thomas was my husband. That truth settled in my chest like stone. I'd become so good at counting absence, I'd forgotten how to notice presence. I picked up the pen, held it over the calendar, the space where day 1,348 should be marked. My hand steady. 3 years of practice. I could do this without thinking, could mark this day and the next and the next. Could keep the ritual, keep the monument, keep myself safe in grief. Or I set the pen down, closed the calendar, turned to the ledger instead. Day 100. I wrote, I chose to stop counting losses, chose to keep counting blessings. Thomas wouldn't want monuments. He'd want living. My hand shook writing it. But I wrote it. For the first time in 1,347 days, I didn't mark the calendar. The unmarked space felt like breathing, like possibility, like betrayal and freedom tangled together. Both true, both necessary. I sat there staring at what I'd done, what I'd chosen, the weight of it enormous and terrifying and right. Then I did something I'd never done. I called for him. Sent word through town. Come, I need to show you something. He arrived within the hour. Rode up fast like he knew, like he'd been waiting. I met him at the door, led him to my desk, showed him the calendar, the gap where day 1348 should be. I'm still afraid, I told him, but I'm choosing different anyway. He looked at the unmarked space, then at me. That's the bravest thing I've seen. I don't want this to be just about counting blessings, I said, the words rushing out now, words I hadn't known I'd say until I was saying them. I want to try counting possibilities, counting days forward instead of backward. I took a breath. Let myself say the rest. Starting with today, with you, if you're willing. The silence stretched, my heart pounding. What if I'd misread everything? What if he'd been helping from kindness, not feeling? What if... I've been willing since day one, he said, just waiting for you to choose it. He stepped closer, still not touching, still respectful. You sure? He asked. Because once you choose this, I'm choosing back. I'm choosing to stay, choosing to build something with you, choosing all of it. I'm sure, I said, meant it, terrified and sure at the same time. I'm scared, but I'm sure. He smiled then, first real smile I'd seen from him, reached for my hand. I took it, held on. What changed? He asked, between yesterday and today. I thought about it. I realized the calendar was keeping me in the past. The ledger was teaching me present. I want to try future. That's terrifying, but I want to try. It is terrifying, he agreed. Future means risk. Risk means you could lose again. I know. Or you could win. You could have years, decades. You could have love again. You could have life. I looked at our hands. His work-worn and capable. Mine smooth and soft from years of not doing, but holding on anyway. I'm choosing to believe that, I said. Choosing you, choosing this. If you meant what you said, I meant it. He pulled me closer, slow, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Thomas was a good man, I said. I loved him. Will always love him. I know. This isn't about replacing him. I know that too. It's about choosing to keep living, choosing to honor him by living well instead of dying slow. Yes. I rested my head against his chest, listened to his heartbeat, steady, real, here. Day 100, I whispered. The number that changed everything. New kind of counting, he said. Better kind. We stood there. Two people who'd counted losses, learning to count different. Learning to count each other, count blessings, count possibilities. The calendar sat closed on my desk. Record of 1,347 days. Record of love and loss. It would always be there. I wasn't erasing it, just completing it. The ledger sat open. Day 100 marked. And tomorrow there'd be 101, and after that, 102. Different numbers, better numbers. Numbers that counted forward instead of back. What are you thinking? He asked. That grief doesn't disappear when you stop counting it, but it makes room for other things, for hope, for possibility, for you. And that I'm ready, finally. After 1,347 days, I'm ready to try living instead of mourning. He kissed my forehead, gentle, patient, like we had all the time in the world. Maybe we did. Day 100. The choice I made. Not to forget Thomas, but to remember I'm still alive, to count what remains instead of what's lost, to measure blessings instead of absence. To choose forward. Day 200. I sat at the kitchen table writing in the ledger. Morning light through windows Thomas had installed, coffee warm beside me. 2 cups. Always 2 now. He read over my shoulder. This man who'd given me a blank book and taught me to count different. This man who'd become my partner, my companion, my choice. Today's entry. Day 200. Realized this morning, I'm not counting to survive anymore. I'm counting to celebrate. What else you celebrating? He asked. Kissed my temple. Familiar gesture now. Comfortable. I looked around the kitchen. The house still the same. The additions Thomas built. The rooms we'd planned to fill. They were filling now. Different from how we'd imagined, but filling. The calendar of losses sat in a drawer upstairs. Not burned, not thrown away, just complete. A record of 1,347 days of grief, of love remembered through loss. I'd counted those days, knew them all. But I'd stopped adding to them, stopped marking time by absence, and started marking it by presence. The ledger in front of me had 200 entries now, 200 blessings counted, 200 days of choosing to notice what remained instead of what was lost. Good coffee, warm house, spring arriving, someone who understands, not alone in the storm. And more recent ones, his laugh, shared work, chosen family, morning light, second chances, love again. I'm celebrating that I learned, I said. Closed the ledger. That what you measure becomes your world, he said across from me. Our morning routine now, coffee together, planning the day. Working the land as partners. I'd gone back to the land, back to the work Thomas had loved, but I wasn't doing it alone anymore. Wasn't managing from distance, was living it, active in it, part of it. I'd been measuring absence, I continued, making it infinite. When I started measuring blessings, I found they were infinite too. A lot of wisdom in that ledger, he said. Wisdom you taught me. No, wisdom you learned. I just gave you the book. I thought about that, about the day he'd shown up with a blank ledger and a simple question. Want to try counting different? I'd resented it, fought it, almost burned it. But I'd tried, day by day, blessing by blessing, had learned that gratitude wasn't betrayal, that noticing I was alive didn't mean forgetting who died, that I could honor Thomas by living well instead of dying slow. I'm teaching others now, I told him. Something I'd started doing recently. Other widows in town, women counting losses like I had, women trapped in monuments to absence. I gave them blank ledgers. Said the same thing he'd said to me. Want to try counting different? Watched them resist. Watched them soften. Watched them transform. Becoming for them what he'd been for me. Witness. Companion. Someone who understood. How is Mrs. Patterson doing? He asked. Day 15. Still angry about it, but writing. She'll get there. I did. You did. Outside, the land stretched green and alive. Spring again, Thomas's favorite season. Second spring since I'd stopped counting losses. I didn't hurt less thinking of him, but I hurt different. The way he'd promised I would. Less like dying. More like remembering I'm alive. What are you thinking about? He asked. Thomas, I said honestly. About how he'd planted trees for a future he never saw. About how they're growing anyway. About how that's not sad, that's beautiful. He'd be happy you're happy. I think so. I hope so. I meant it. Thomas had loved me. Would have wanted life for me. Would have wanted love. Would have wanted blessings counted instead of losses memorized. I didn't need to choose between honoring him and living again. Could do both. Was doing both. I was richer than I knew, I said. Not in money, though I still have that. Richer in blessings. In second chances. In days that count forward instead of back. He reached across the table, took my hand. You're teaching me too, you know. Teaching me there's always more to count, always more to celebrate. We teach each other, I said. And it was true. This partnership, this choosing each other daily, This building of something new that honored what was lost without being imprisoned by it. I looked at the closed ledger, at the 200 days marked, at all the days ahead, still uncounted. Tomorrow would be 201, and after that, 202, and on and on. Different numbers, better numbers. Comfort can't buy peace, I said, speaking the wisdom I'd learned. But choosing gratitude can. Choosing to count what remains instead of what's lost. Choosing to measure blessings. And he smiled because he knew there was more. And mourning was necessary. But so is noticing I'm blessed. Both can be true. I stood, went to him. He pulled me close. Outside, the trees Thomas planted reached for sky, growing, thriving, proof that love continues even after the lover is gone. Inside, two people who'd learned to count different, who'd chosen each other, who'd chosen life. I'd spent 1,347 days counting what I lost. Now I counted what I found, what I chose, what I built. The grief didn't disappear. Thomas was still gone. That would always be true, but it wasn't the only truth anymore. I was still here. That was true too, and I was choosing to make that matter. Change what you count, I whispered. Change how you live. I'd counted loss and lived in the past. I counted blessings now and lived in the present. Tomorrow I'd count again, not because I had to, because I chose to. Because what you measure becomes your world. And I was measuring love now. All kinds of love. Past and present. Lost and found. All of it blessed. All of it counted. All of it mine.